If you're going to focus on something in a relationship to make it successful, focus on partnership. I never say, I hope you have joy. I say, bring the joy.
Yeah.
And I never say, I hope you have a good life. I'm like, schedule a life. That's really key in relationships. We get to talk about what to focus on in your relationship as we round out this week's theme of focus and discipline.
Yesterday, I had more messages, I think, than any other day in the history of GrowthDay morning show, all about focus. Like more screenshots, more reposts, more than any other day I've ever seen in the last 8 weeks. And today is show number 40. Today is show number 40 that we're doing.
Wow.
But I realized, wow, and a lot of them were around one thing that you shared yesterday about scheduling life into life, which I think is huge. And I know today we're going to talk a lot about relationships, but also something you said so profound just hit people. I even had, people in my that are in my day to day bring it up in their day. They're like, I never schedule life into life. I'm like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a big thing. It was, I think, a big aha moment for a lot of people, just like taking a step back and going, because listen, we're all busy. We all have things go right, go wrong. Stressors happen, throughout the day. And we all have relationships, right? And relationships are hard. And bringing focus, but also just the concept you brought up yesterday of scheduling life into life. I think that's important for us. I think that's important for our relationships. That's something I need to level up on this year, big time, is scheduling life into life in relationships in terms of what I focus on too. It's hard. Yeah.
I work with high performers and they're in like a crushing season of time. Anytime I say something to that effect of, build life into your life, make sure you're doing that, whether that's your workout or that's your meditation or that's your morning journal or your growth day morning show time, peoples. But you got to say, oh, okay, I got to reconnect with the energies and the goodness and the spirit and the thing of life. Otherwise, it's a slog. And a lot of people have a slog. They're just grinding through and there's no enjoyment, and they blame the thing, the project or the team or the company or the kids, or they blame something else. And it's like, oh, it's our job to have reverence for life. It is our job. It is incumbent upon us to build in, whether that's your passions or your hobbies or your just those simple moments of wellness or grace or joy each day. That's why I never say, I hope you have joy. I say, bring the joy.
Yeah.
And I never say, I hope you have a good life. I'm like, schedule a life. Schedule life into your day. And so, for me, that's like Denise and I took a walk this morning, and she was dropping bombs this morning. I was like, I was asking her about what she would share on this topic today of focusing on relationship. And I had something I wanted to share with her and see if it was.
Was she like, let me give you a long list, Brendon?
She probably was thinking of the long list and then parsing out very delicately and thoughtfully, not to hurt my feelings, I'm sure. She's just smarter than me, as everyone knows. So she's like, whenever I hear those gears grinding.
She picked my book cover. When we were down to the last few, I'm like, you and me kind of had the same thoughts. And when Denise said to go with the glossy, because heart open, like there's something about the light coming from it. I'm like, okay, done. Yeah, she is. Okay, sorry, go ahead, continue.
No, she's so good at that. She's so good. She's good at so many things I'm just not. And she just, I mean, like our house now, you were here, you see it now, she just is so well designed now. It's just like so, we had neighbors over there the other day and they're like, wow, it's so different than all the other homes around of what she's done inside. She just has that. She has so many things that she's so good at that I'm just not. And
isn't that great? Yeah.
That's why I always ask her perspective, like when we teach something, especially on relationships, because she's better at relationships than I am anyway. So her thing was, if you're going to focus on something in a relationship to make it successful, the thing to focus on, since this is focus week, is focus on partnership. Focus on the partnership. Always be thinking about the partnership. And her way of describing that was to make sure that whatever is important to your partner or to the other, that you are making that also important in how you go about things. So the example she gave, which is so right on. She's like, as an example, she's playing, this morning, she puts on music in the house, right? And she puts on a playlist that she knows I like. And those are things like, I don't even, sometimes you notice, I'm like, honey, I love this place. She's like, I know, she ordered, we're getting sushi. And that's definitely my dish more than hers. And so it's like simple things like that. You think of what would your partner like and focus on that and deliver that for them. And a good question in marriage or partnership or your spouse, your intimate other, is how much focus do you give to what is it that they love? What is it that you can do to amplify that, or to serve that, or to give that, or allow grace for that, or time for that? I thought that was great. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. And do you also do that for her intentionally? Like, is that something that's a practice that you have where you think of like, oh, let me put this playlist on for Denise, or do you do it in other ways?
Yes, but in completely inadequate ways. So like, I know how important like a clean home is to Denise. Like it's like up there, right? And so to me, I feel like I'm 100% of the time picking up. I mean, because the way I would be a complete like nutty professor disaster. So I feel like I'm 100% of the time, I feel like all I'm doing is picking up. But for her, who's so good at that, like that one cup out, or these, this slop I leave on the counter when I make my morning shake, my intention is I'm going to clean that up 5 hours later. No, you don't get to clean up 5 hours an hour. To clean up as you do it. I'm a clean up at the end of the day guy. She's a clean up as you go gal. And so I think I'm doing it, but it's not always there. So I have to own that. And those, someone just said on Facebook, we see Karen said, little things mean a lot. That would be the definition of partnership to Denise. And I think I am okay at it. I wouldn't, I should get better. She deserves that.
Yeah. This past year for me and Paulo in our relationship, so we're coming out of this 10-year decade of building a business together, right? And stepping away from that, it's been a really interesting journey in terms of not just healing things, but also just like rediscovering who are we again, how are we as a married couple again, and then we're also newer parents, right? So we have a 2.5-year-old daughter, Wender, and then our son Wilder's 10 months old, and it's been a wild year. Like, we had Wilder during the pandemic, and it's a long story, but via surrogacy and this whole journey that's been a 10-year journey. And Paulo got to be in the parking lot of the hospital in an RV watching the birth on Zoom because no one was allowed in the hospital. It was a wild experience.
What a wild 2020.
Yeah. So we've been, going through so much change. And one thing you said that I want to share that I think is so powerful that Denise brought up actually about just focusing on partnership. We implemented something in our relationship this past year that has been really powerful. And it's this idea that's been around for a long time, but we hadn't been actually embracing it. And I want to share it. It has to do with focus. When you have a disagreement or a situation, or it can be something so small, like you leaving something on the floor and whatever it is, right? We were both raised, Paulo and I realized, my husband Paulo and I realized we were both raised around a lot of different people that would blame or would like those kind of things, right? And there's this idea that when you're in partnership, it's not who's right, who's wrong. It's both of you together against the problem.
Yes.
Right? And we started implementing that into our relationship for the first time in big ways this past year. And it's been huge. And so when something goes wrong, or, this or that, or there's a disaster, or one of the kids did something terrible, and you want to be like, you're the one that taught them, instead of that, it's like, oh, wait, it's us against the problem, not us against each other. And we're both intentionally breaking patterns we were raised around right now, that sometimes, come up instinctively, where you want to just say, oh, no, it wasn't me, it's your fault, right? So, and what I realized is we've been doing this a lot, and it's good. It's so powerful taking that focus in a relationship about when something goes wrong, because we all realize the first instincts we have, right? Which is, oh, they did that again, or this or that, or, that's not my fault, or all those things that just aren't healthy, frankly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh wait, in partnership, right? What Denise shared is like, when you focus on partnership, I think a big part of that focus, when you have it, us against the problem, even when sometimes it's your partner's fault. Like, I have to be so intentional about my focus, even if I think like, like that's so, like I get, and I feel zero responsibility for it.
I've seen you a few times go, and you're like, uh-oh, it's trouble.
But I have to be intentional, like, okay, if I think it's his fault, that doesn't help me any. And that's a divisive kind of a thought. So if this is my partner, if this is my life partner, or, it's us against the problem. So let's figure this out together. And I found that this focus in terms of relationships can be applied everywhere, right? In terms of friendships, also in work. There's been times, Brendon, in this book launch where, there's been a million moving parts, as you know, from the event to this, to all the stuff. And it's wild because I'm implementing this also into those types of relationships, right? So I won't get into who or why or how, but one night someone was flipping out over something going wrong with the event a few days before the event. And she was like, whoa, the call. And I'm like, okay, we're not opponents. Like, we're working together. It's us against I had to use those words. It's us against the problem. So let's figure it out. Because she was worried I was going to blame her. And so she was getting super defensive. And I'm like, oh, no, it's us against the problem, right? The idea of partnership. So anyway, sharing that concept has been around forever. It's something newer that has been really impactful in my relationship. So yeah, sharing that in case anyone needs to hear that today.
That's one of those personal development things you just go, wow, that's so common sense, but not always common practice. Yeah. And that's why we suffer. It's just like, of course, of course. Denise and I were talking about like some universal things this morning, or I was trying to pose questions. And one of them was this, I don't know if it's an idea or a philosophy, but I think it's a good practice, because I was trying to think of, if you're going to focus on something in a relationship, what should it be? Since this is like, we're talking about focus in a relationship, like what should it be? And hers was partnership, which I love. Mine is, I don't know how I actually don't have the words for it, but to me, it is a reminder that when there is a problem or there is something you don't like about the other person, it's easy to take that small thing and explode it up, right? That making a molehill into a mountain concept. And what happens is a lot of marriages end up being very bitter because they nitpick on each other, and then nitpicking becomes the focus. And I don't know if this is a philosophy, but what would be magic to me is, what if you can remind yourself when you want to nitpick somebody, when you want to just like tear down that thing, or you want to focus or day after day, you remember what they did and it was wrong and it's upsetting and it just like sits with you. What if there's a way that you could step back and just remember like that big picture of like, oh, I chose this person. This person chose me. If you got married or you have faith like I do, I feel like Denise was chosen for me and I was chosen for her. I feel like our souls were supposed to come together. And I think that was God guided in the way that we met. And so I believe like, oh, wait, okay, I might not like this little thing, but God gave me this person and we committed to God for this person. And I feel like if you can always step back and go, remember what a blessing it is that you chose them, they chose you. And that's a gift. That's something to be grateful for. That's a miracle in some ways, I feel like. And so it's like a miracle that out of 7.5 billion souls, you came together, you bonded, there was that moment. And what if when you're really upset or hooked on something, you could just step back and remind like, oh, wait, this person's a blessing. And now you're honoring the person as a blessing and as a gift. It's not to say you don't notice the things. It's not to say that those things you don't bring up or have a difficult discussion about or address or try to improve. But if the totality of the perspective is always on the things that they do that drive you crazy, you're going to destroy that relationship. If it is, I love, honor, respect, protect, care for, appreciate this person. I might not like this, but that's like one line item in an awesome thing in which you chose. It's like that perspective would be my thing is, what are you gonna focus on? Focus on perspective, focus on the blessing of who they are. And if you don't like something, bring it up. If something they're doing is toxic, discuss it, work through it. If you can't, and it becomes the relationship, then that's one thing. But I think for most people, they just obsess about the small things and they forget the blessing of the people and the moments and life. That's what I'm always saying, reverence of life, reverence of life. Well, reverence for your partner. You know, there's plenty of times I'm sure Denise hates me, but she's just so nice to me. And there's plenty of times that she does something, I'm like, oh my God. But I'm like, wait, I'm so lucky. Like this morning we're walking and I just started with saying, I just want to say, I love you, honey. I appreciate the life that we have together and that you've built, and that the home that you've given us, and the cat and all these other things, you know, just all these things. And so I just think you have to start with the place of gratitude and perspective that you chose them, they chose you, God chose it, soul, universe. Start from that magical place. And maybe I asked Denise, is this too airy fairy Pollyanna-ish? And I don't know what the outcome is on that one, but I just feel like that's a nice reminder. Your partner is a gift.
I think that's so good. I think so many of us need to remember that focus, right? Every day. I think not only will it obviously make our partner feel more appreciated, but also it's how to, what's the word you use for it? Literally how to generate joy as well, right? Because what we focus on is what gets bigger. And, you know, one thing you just said too, I think we can apply to friendships as well. I think just even the serendipity of two people coming together, like in this lifetime,
yes,
just showing up for each other as friends. You know, there's probably people in our community that maybe they don't have a partner, but maybe with their friends or somebody in their family, they've been like, oh, that's so annoying, or that person did, you know, all the things, right? But it is easy to focus on those things, but it's like, taking a step back and just celebrating that they're there. I also think perspective can be applied. You know, this whole week has been about focus and about, you know, all levels of focus, including, like you said, scheduling life into life, which I think is big. And it's funny, something you just said reminded me of this morning. I walked outside of the hotel room, was like, couldn't believe it. My entire coffee, the whole lid came off, explodes everywhere. It's all over me, all over the carpet, everywhere, my coffee. And I'm thinking about, literally, no joke, scheduling life into life, right? Bringing the joy. Listen, there's terrible situations and there's no need to make light of terrible situations. But most of our lack of joy comes from the small things throughout the day that we focus on the negative parts of, right?
yes.
And so I have my coffee explode and I'm like, no joke, I swear, in the moment, I'm like, how blessed am I to have a cup with a lid? Like a cup with a lid. There's, you know what I mean? And I literally this morning pushed a button in my room and made a Keurig coffee. How many people, like, you know what I mean? I start focusing on that and I'm able to just go get another coffee. Like, it's like all perspective, but it's also, I use summoning joy. That's it. That's what you say, summoning joy. But even just perspective in a coffee exploding, or perspective in our partner, and in our relationships, I think it's life-changing when we start to be aware of and intentional about it, right? In the little things or in the big things, like big important relationships in our life, you know?
So key in every moment. I think there's a magic to, you know, a lot of what we teach in flow or high performance, like skill sets, like athletes and other people, is to be able to step back and observe your mental chatter. And often we'll say to be able to know that you're not your mind, you're the one observing your mind. You're not your thoughts. You are the soul observing the thoughts, like a ticker tape. And the thoughts are always going to go like a ticker tape, right? You don't have to believe them as true, and you don't have to grab onto them, hold onto them. You can just like observe it and observe that mental chatter. And I always say, observe which direction that ticker tape mental chatter is going. Is it going in a negative, obsessive, frustrated direction that's only going to like churn more emotional turmoil? Or is it going in a way that is honoring the other, or honoring the blessings of life, or honoring, you know, the bigger picture so that we don't get stuck into this moment. I remember reading, what was it? Good book last night, Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And he has this great line in there. He's like, at some point you have to remember, you're literally this little speck on this globe spinning around the universe at a quadrillion miles an hour. Is it really so consequential what she said to you that upset you yesterday? And I just loved, is it really so important that someone didn't say something perfect to you or upset about that? Something. It's just perspective. It's just like, for me, I always come back to mortality motivation. Like, I am driven by and understand that life is short. So someone upset me 4 days ago, it's just not my focus. Something that I didn't do right in the house or something I didn't do perfect in my last email, like, it's not even with me right now, because what's with me is right here. Like, when you have presence and you develop flow and the capacity to be here now in the moment, you just don't have the thought to hang on to everything from yesterday. It doesn't mean that you're not fixing things, improving things, moving the needle forward. It just means you can sit with the now and not expect it to be perfect. And I think that's really key in relationships, to just focus on being with the other person and letting them go. Like, even Denise and I this morning, I said something and later she thought, oh, did you mean this? And I was like, no, that's not what I said. And she's like, oh, okay, I was just checking, right? Because what it reminded to me is, oh, we think we're saying one thing, but others always hear something else. They hear from their own lenses, right? Yeah. And so you always have to go, let me just be with that. Because that doesn't mean she heard it right or wrong, or that sometimes plays out, I think, for people, but I think it's the meaning people grab onto things is completely different. Yeah. And so just remembering that and just being with people as they have their reaction, just being with your partner as, guess what? They came home and they're crappy with the kids and you want to say, like, don't be crappy with the kids. But you can also just be with them and say, I see it's a hard day. Instead of judging them, don't be crappy with the kid. Be like, I see it's a hard day. And just sit with them. I think that's grace in relationships. I think that's something to focus on. Focus on the reality that other people have another reality. Being open and aware and thoughtful of your mental chatter, but also where they're at. And I think that can all help in relationships too.
It's also just so freeing, and you talk about like the idea of our thoughts and a ticker tape and this and that, and versus just being present with somebody in that moment. There's that famous saying, I've been through some terrible things in life, some of which actually happened, right? Because so many times we go into something and, today, just to share a real time behind the curtain example, going on the Drew Barrymore show. So Drew Barrymore show is airing today, and we just did it together, and then it airs today. I was so nervous, Brendon. I went into it and I had to check myself, right? Because I'm like, she's another billion-dollar beauty boss. That's going to be awesome. Does she even like I want to make sure I add value to her audience, like all the things. I just didn't know, and then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to show up in just full spirit and self and be present with her and just love her, because she's probably just like me. I've never met her before in real life. So she's probably just like me, like you, like everyone else. We're all the same, right? So I had to switch my focus going into the show, and just like what you just said, being fully present, open heart, just like with her. And literally, I'm so glad I did that, because if I would have been in my head, like stuck in my head with all the chatter, all the things, I would have lived through so many things that never would have happened. And so many worries that never would have happened. And I go live on the show, or went live on the show with her. And she was like, I've been following you for the last 10 years. She knows everything about IT Cosmetics.
Wow.
I know. I'm like, what? And like, it was just the coolest experience. We were just vibing at like the highest level. I was saying stuff and she's like, I have goosebumps all over my body. We were like, it was just the best experience. And it was like just full presence, right? Just full presence. I think that's really powerful. And in terms of focus, because it's freeing.
Because that's always a good point. There was I think it was Rumi or someone like that said, notice whether your mind is towards worry or wonder, which is cool because like your baby's name. But it's notice where your mind is going. It's like, are you open and like wondrous about life and interested and curious and like, oh, wow, I wonder how this could be. Or is it always like, what if this terrible thing happens? And know that is 100% your choice. That's the most powerful thing in personal development, is that we get to control our own thoughts. That's incredible. That's an incredible thing. I mean, there is mental health and mental illness issues that prevent people from doing that, which is about 8% of the public at any given time. But the reality is most of us, we have that command. We just haven't trained it. It's like, we just haven't trained our mind for that. That's why I love this Growth Day community, is we're in this place of going, oh, hey, let's focus on personal development. Let's remind ourselves that we have this incredible ability to have emotional freedom and mental clarity and the ability to direct our thoughts and our attitude every day. I mean, part of Growth Day is we get to choose this attitude we have every day. We get to choose this energy. Jamie's tired, people. I'm tired, people.
And I didn't shower today, but I'm here and I'm bringing the joy.
We're just like, people are all like, oh, they must have it so easy. Like, if you saw how many people and teams and everything else were managing and running and doing it at the same time, you'd be like, oh my God, all of that plus family and finance and everything. Guess what? You're doing the same thing. We're all like, we all assume like, oh, they have it. It's like, no. It's just that some people really chose what spirit to show up in today. They chose it. They summoned it, even if it isn't there. Believe me, people are like, Brendon, are you always happy? I'm like, oh, ask my wife. No, sometimes I wander around the house like lost nutty professor or grumpy or just like kind of trying to figure things out or get pissed off about that thing or this thing. But in times to serve, right? If your children are going to bed and you're going in to read, the book, the children's book at the end of the night to put them to sleep, you got to choose your energy when you're walking in there, even if you had a hard day at work. That is showing up in the service and the spirit required to have good relationships and be available for other people. It's not easy. It's not innate. You design that, you develop that, you choose that. And I think that what's powerful in Growth Day is we're all just saying, hey, let's do that together. Let's set our mindset in the morning. Let's encourage each other. Let's remind each other of the powers we really have to believe in ourselves, our work, our mission, to remember our strength, to focus on our relationships in positive ways. I think all of this helps so that the summoning of it and the bringing of the joy and the feeling of the day, all these things that we teach, they become easier. They become more natural, right? Because first it's an intention and a desire, then it's a behavior, then it's a pattern, then it's a practice, then it's part of your psychology, then that's just who you are, babe. And so if you haven't worked this year on focusing on choosing that attitude with your own mental chatter, but also with your partner and giving them perspective and giving them grace and doing the things we talked about today, I think that will serve you. This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.